welcome to the tantalizingly named Work Fast and Break Shit, in-house approaches to dealing with data. It's easy to throw money at agencies and consultants and let them handle the bulk of data and marketing outputs, but several companies are reimagining the system. So with me right now, I have three innovators who will let you in on how they're transforming their businesses from within. Sharon, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Sharon Rubin. I work for Conduent. We're a services and solutions provider to life sciences.
Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Shaughnessy, Enterprise Lead for Customer Experience and Digital Innovation at GSK.
And last but not least, Chris.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christopher Nugent, Senior Director of Digital Marketing Strategy from Kinexa Pharmaceuticals.
So Andy, I'm going to start off with you. Why not use agencies? What's changed so much that having an internal team within a pharma organization makes sense?
Well, I believe that in terms of the demand for answers from marketers goes above and beyond something that agencies can actually answer. We're hearing about looking at a campaign holistically, whereas most of the time you'll be hiring agencies to perform a certain task. And whether that's you have an agency that flights paid search and mass display and maybe some programmatic. You have one agency that handles your email channel, another agency that handles one-off projects, and they're all on the hook to provide reporting, but it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen without necessarily providing that holistic view. When you embed an organization within your company that enables you to, break down those barriers to provide that kind of holistic view, it gives a lot more value to the brands themselves to understand what's the interplay between those channels rather than looking at them in isolation. Another thing that I believe is something that is critical to having an internal, what I'll call a center of excellence for analytics in particular, is around data sensitivity. So outside of the fact that partners aren't necessarily willing to share data streams with each other, there's also the part about prescription or sales data that third parties really shouldn't be privy to. And so in order to tie any sort of campaign engagement or exposure to impact would be very difficult. Now, there are the three other things that I would like to mention here briefly, and it doesn't hold for all agencies. I don't want to make these blanket statements. But in my experience, there are three things also that really reinforce the concept of standing up an internal capability that will be able to assess campaign performance. One is, from an agency perspective, limited expertise. They are, from a media standpoint, they look at paid search, they look at display, and they look at it from an operational perspective to provide, brand health metrics, make sure everything's running properly. But that's what they do, and that's who they hire. And so that is the expertise that they may be very well trained in those particular aspects, but considering the questions that brands are having now really limits the ability to perform anything that's of higher value in terms of creating a deliverable. Objectivity. Now, I'm not saying that agencies are not objective in their assessment of their own performance, but it's like, the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak. I've not necessarily run into any agencies that have provided a subjective lens in terms of the performance itself. But if you're sitting on the same side of the table as the brand, we want to make sure that we're providing accurate and actionable information without necessarily being tied down to make sure that, oh my God, if we do not perform well, then they may pull funding. We don't have that. And finally, and this is something that's come up very recently at GSK, is around the quality of work. The agencies don't seem to be staffed up to really start thinking about things bigger picture. And so it's been up to us to provide that for them. And that's not to say there aren't any growing pains, because there have been, especially around data accessibility and availability. However, we're going above and beyond click-through rates and website visits. I mean, we've been talking about this for the past 20 plus years, and it's still coming through in reporting. Those are lower value type of metrics that really don't provide much in terms of greater insight, in my opinion. And so, there's starting to be, left behind, so to speak. So, if you want to really, grab the bull by the horns in terms of where we're going, in terms of the future of analytics, it's not there. It's important that we know campaign health, absolutely. But we are, as a company at GSK and as a group, we're looking to answer those bigger questions around, investment and engagement. How does that tie to impact, et cetera, which again, they may not have the capacity or the availability of data to answer.
I'm actually gonna let Chris and Sharon add in on this because that was a lot to unpack, and I'm sure there's a lot of alignment there.
I'll defer to Sharon first.
Thanks, Chris. Well, what really caught my attention is that we have to rethink ROI and how we assess ROI, right? It can't be about the cost of a program and how many patients based on the cost of the product. That's not the equation anymore. We really have to consider the investment that we're making in machine learning and automation and AI. We have to consider the cost of the platforms that we need to introduce and really come up with a better metrics. And really, I think what Andy's speaking to is that we're moving from high cost channels to lower cost investment channels, right? And how do we measure that? And click-through rates and, time spent on websites really doesn't cut it anymore. So we have to think about this more holistically. We have to think about the customer journey and how the customer, not just at the end of the journey and an assessment or survey of how they perceive that experience is. We have to look at it across the experience and really try to find those intervention points and really rethink how we're looking at our business. And content's really important in helping us to be able to drive improvements in that quality. So, I think Andy's really in the right place in terms of evaluating how to assess and how to create or rethink the way in which we're delivering content today. And our agency partners are very important to us. But I think we have to start thinking about how the ecosystem is changing.
I agree with our agency partners are important. And I think my fellow innovators have kind of hit it on the head. The problem is that to Andy's point, it's the execution. Right, it's the real kind of tactical piece. It's the ability to not move fast at all. I've had with my prior company, we had 7 meetings about Facebook ads. It should only take 1 with my agency partner. It shouldn't take 7. And this is where I kind of come down on where just the pace of which the agency doesn't see the sense of urgency in terms of us, like from a speed of business perspective. And I think, given the times, even pre-COVID, we need to really kind of move faster and be more nimble and more agile. And I think our agencies are just holding us back, where everything needs to be 100% and perfect. Which to me, where I come from the consulting world and a few other startups, and now this is my 3rd forte in the pharma. The thing is, what I've seen about pharma is that we're just lagging behind so much. We're so worried about regulation, things like that. And I'm not saying like avoid your parochial review committees or anything, or compliance teams, avoid that. No, make sure you get alignment with them early. But you can't have the agency be the one saying, oh, we have to go back and we have to come up with this idea, or we have to implement this. It's like, no, the ad is now. I tell this story a couple of times where like it was Alcohol Awareness Month and we couldn't get our website out for alcohol awareness until next month. And the reason is because of this video. So kind of boiling it down to like, what's the most minimum viable product we can get out there to get our message out there to our patients and HCPs to talk about these issues, rather than just continuing to have our agencies hold us back and really not let us to drive the business forward. It's really annoying and just kills time, and also our budget. When you see these website builds for 6-7 figures and you're like, we couldn't even meet our deadline of April, like it's now mid-May and now the site goes live. It makes no sense.
So let me ask you, Chris. So how I think Andy mentioned alignments. What are the hurdles to pathways to working fast and breaking shit? I mean, how do you get internal alignment into what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a couple different things there, right? Where importantly, you kind of look at like, okay, the agency is one part of it, right? They're going to come at you with like this big idea meeting and really put, in the brand's head, kind of these big ideas of like, oh, we can do, I'm going to make something of like personalization mapping journey, right? Which it's going to require like 10 meetings, which makes no sense. You could probably do it in one, especially if the agency is already your AOR and they know your audience, they know what your targets are. It's not somebody you're onboarding for the first time. But from an internal alignment perspective, I think it's like working across the aisle with your partners in IT, your partners in operations, sales, and really aligning on just your infrastructure, whether that's a marketing technology stack, whether that's a, what integrations you're bringing into Salesforce or whatever CRM you choose, or Viva. Really kind of looking at it from that perspective, because to Sharon's point about types of investment, you just don't want people just randomly going out and buying certain platforms just for the sake of buying a platform because it looks pretty, right? You have to start thinking about from a usability standpoint and a scalability standpoint. We had a client back in my consulting days that literally went out and bought 14 different pieces of software just because they wanted to, because they thought it really looked pretty. And then they had to justify 400 grand in their budget for next year of like, why did you go out and buy 14 different platforms? 3 of them are the same thing. Like, why did you do this? So and this is the whole part of like, the agency just puts these ideas of like, you need this, and this, when you really don't. The agency should be able to conform to what you have in house. And you should be able to kind of be the master of that in terms of, to Andy's point about protecting your data, like, what's best from an application and infrastructure standpoint to what you need to protect, right? So you don't want third parties in there. You just want you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. You just want yourself and your team to be able to execute on what's in house. And having that third party in there that it could muck everything up is just a bit of a bigger problem waiting to happen. And the last thing you want is compliance coming after you, or legal saying, hey, why did this go out? And it's all screwed up, and you have to answer for it, not the agency. And that's kind of the third part here. Is like, we never hold the agencies accountable in terms of like, I got told recently that a deliverable wasn't a deliverable. It was considered consulting, even though it's in the contract saying it's a deliverable for an integration to a platform. No, it's a consulting thing. So this is where I have a problem with agency, where they change the rules on the fly, and we don't hold their feet to the fire for it. And I think we shouldn't moving forward.
Andy, I want to throw this question at you because I know you're a little bit of a larger company. How do you get internal alignment for what's considered innovative thinking?
Well, the good news is that my company has really embraced innovation and digital. I mean, there's no sell-in for that. What is difficult is aligning the capabilities to achieve the vision. I will say it's still very siloed. We do have a couple of camps. For my particular team, the brands are certainly on our side and will help pave the way if need be, to bring our deliverables, and yes, I said deliverables, to completion, right? I think the hardest part really, especially on the technology side, is that the technology piece at GSK is a large organization, but they do work in silos, and they do not usually have the end user in mind, meaning that they sometimes appear to think that they know what we really need, when in actuality, it's not. So a case in point was, we are still in the process of onboarding a lot of data. However, myself and a colleague on my team took it upon ourselves, which is not what we do, this, just to be clear, but in order to enable the success of our team, we needed to join with our technology team to get them to understand, number one, how do you bring this data in? Number two, what's important? Number three, and this is critical, validate the data. And I don't mean columns and rows. I want to ensure that, if there are, let's say, 100 impressions in one platform, that there are 100 impressions in the environment, our data, internalized data environment. And that's something that they weren't really pursuing. It was more along the lines of, it's in there and the columns and rows add up, so we're good. The problem is they're not the ones left holding the bag if the data is incorrect. We are. So we showed them a way to validate the data, to embed that into their process. And now they've actually rolled that out globally, which is great because now we have some confidence in what we're extracting from the environment that's in there because of the fact they did one additional thing to the process. And that's just to make sure the data is accurate. It's such a small thing, but it's so important. And so now we're starting to have, closer, more solid ties to that team so that they understand that what they're building is something that we'll actually use, because to build something just to build something is a waste of time, energy, and funding. And so that's one example that we've used to try to gain internal alignment. It's more on the technology and the data side, not necessarily from the brands. They are all in.
So Sharon, relatedly with stakeholders, what trends have you seen that are impacting pharma sales and marketing initiatives? And what are the implications for these stakeholders?
Right. Well, so I think that we're still in a phase of understanding the impact of COVID, and especially as we go into the Delta variant, we're seeing continual lockdowns. And, all that really does is reinforce the fact that we have decreased access to our customers today. And we really need to rethink how we're going to engage with them. And so, with respect to trends around that, it really has moved from a customer experience landscape to, from a customer engagement landscape to a customer experience landscape. And we really need to find ways to deliver value. And I think what I'm hearing across this panel is that we're looking for technology as an option to help us to really solve for these problems. So in our company, and in the research that we've done with our clients, we've seen that pharma is really lagging in terms of digital maturity. It's at the bottom of the list compared to every other industry that's out there today. And when we do engage with them on contracts and scopes of work, 40% of them are looking for analytics being built into that contract. And of that, 53% of those are for support of sales and marketing. I mean, so clearly there's a need out there. And what we're seeing is that there's a growing demand for cloud-based platforms that can offer a data-driven approach to engaging with our customers in a much more and scalable manner. And that's really going to help sales and marketing while they start to apply automation to simple processes. You don't need somebody sitting at an Access database anymore, behind this computer trying to align records. You can apply automation using deterministic and probabilistic approaches to really help identify who that individual is, to identify that resolution, right? So there's efficiencies that can be gained there, and that efficiency will drive to the ability to engage with your customers in a real-time decisioning manner, so that you're working in an environment with no latency, where it happens in the background when you go home at night at 5 o'clock. Your programs, your campaigns are still running. So that's what we're seeing in terms of trends. And, as Andy spoke about, content's going to be really critical. We need content in a real-time, personalized way. And it's technology that's going to allow us to be able to do that. And, I think what we're seeing right now is an evaluation of how disruptive do companies want to be, what's their appetite for innovation, how much budget do they want to put behind it, and how is that going to help them to drive growth? So we're seeing a real focus on value, and with a start, think big but start small type of an approach. And we're really back in a pilot mode for just about everything that we're doing: test and learn and grow and be modular. So I think from a trend standpoint, there's a lot to be said here in terms of the investments that are being made. Prioritization is going to be key.
Chris, I see you shaking your head a lot. Do you want to add on to this?
No, I think I couldn't agree more, especially about prioritization. I mean, I think as we kind of look at the landscape that we are approaching, whether it's, COVID and now into Delta, thinking about ways for us to really take advantage of this, right? Where we can say, what's not working, right? And what can we do to kind of like really improve internal processes, and whether that's establishing best practices and standards, providing guardrails or RACEs, to really kind of redefine the relationship we have with our agency partners, I think is key. If Delta's taught us, or COVID, I should say, has taught us anything, that we really need to kind of rely on ourselves more than anything, and rely on the internal teams that we have. and whether that's, you know, your IT organization, your operations team, sales, because at the end of the day, like, the organization has to take care of itself, right? And if you don't have the right technology platforms in place or the right processes in place, you know, you're setting yourself up for failure. Um, I've gotten to a point now where I think we've broken the habit of the first instinct is to pick up the phone and call the agency. I think it's more of like, hey, what can this internal team do? Like, I know that they can send emails. I know that they can build websites in-house. I know they can do programmatic advertising in-house. What else? Oh, we need to go buy a virtual platform. Let's go talk to the digital team. Let's do things in-house first. And if we can't figure it out in-house, then reach out. But give that team, like, call a meeting and have like a quick half hour, 45-minute, just brainstorm like what is possible, right? And we've been doing a lot with this with our patient team, just trying to sit down and figure out, okay, what's the best way to reach out to patients, in COVID, and really having those things. What do we develop a mobile app? We could do that in-house. So being able to kind of take the skill sets you have internally and really take it to the next level. And actually, at the end of the day, you can save a lot of money because you're not reaching out to that agency to do all that development work. Just last year alone, when I was at Alkermes, we saved over $1.3 million just from keeping all of our work in-house and all of our execution of materials in-house.
So while we're on the I think we'll always be on the topic of COVID, but particularly after the pandemic caused an abrupt move to virtual interactions. Sharon, let me ask you, how can companies optimize their channel mix to increase HCP access?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for me, I really think it comes down to three things, and it's very similar to the conversation we've already been having, but it's data, automation, and journey orchestration. On the data front, we're bringing in all this data, so we really have to focus on how we're going to integrate it, and integrate it in such a way that it creates a single customer view. Right, most of that is done in a customer data platform where you can use automation in order to create that. And it's within that environment that you can connect your MarTech or your AdTech platforms or any data set that you really think is going to be valuable for you to manage your campaigns or to engage your field with their customers. And then on the automation front, that really allows us to really rethink the workflow and simple processes, right? And so what can we automate that are simple tasks that really help to drive efficiencies and improve how we're engaging. Some of the examples of how we're using automation in this way is, to get samples out to physicians or to help teams collaborate better with one another, or for identity resolution, to create that single view of a customer. So all of that is really the foundation that we're going to need in order to be very effective with getting our campaigns and our message out there to our key customers in an efficient way. And the journey orchestration, we call it intelligent orchestration, which is really about delivering personalized communications across multiple channels. And really what that allows you to do is to get the next best action out there through the preferred channel, so you get the next best message or the next best action, whatever that may be. But it's really supported by real-time decisioning. So, I look at it as data, automation, and journey orchestration. And if we do this right, it'll help us to improve the coordination of multiple disparate campaigns. It'll increase access. It'll increase our campaign effectiveness, our selling time, our productivity, and ultimately lead to a better customer experience. And we know that physicians, according to Sermo's last survey, said 66% of physicians say we can do better. So I think we can do better, and technology is going to help us to get there.
And do you have any thoughts on access to HCPs?
Well, I wanted to speak on something that Sharon was talking about, automation and whatnot. Pharma is really looking to invest in machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to orchestrate that journey, to serve the messages at the right time. I mean, I think, and I know this may be another blanket statement, but I think we're still in their infancy. At least GSK is. We're taking steps, and we have initiated next best experience, next best action engines. I read an outstanding, really impactful article from Avinash Kaushik, if you know who he is, around ML and AI and taking humans out of the equation in terms of decisioning? Not entirely, but he was looking at it from, say, a data analyst perspective, where they were saying that a lot of the data analysis that's being done in order to inform these decisions that marketers are making, a lot of what those folks do are hunters. They hunt, they try to find those insights that are somewhere, that needle in a haystack type of insight that will potentially blow people's minds or continually have a sea change shift. Now, those are very few and far between. However, but that takes a lot of time, energy, focus. That's what he calls hunting. We should be eating instead. Whereas if we have the machines stood up that can do this in real time, then in that way, they will generate the insights. We will be the end consumers of those insights to make the decisions. The machine is not making the decisions from a strategic perspective, but from a tactical one. We should be able to rely on them as our data stack maturity evolves. We're not there yet, but I am 100% in alignment with what Sharon was saying around automation, that automation fueling the orchestration of our customer journey and being able to tie that all back without necessarily human interference that could bias what we do from a tactical standpoint in order to inform our more strategic initiatives.
Chris, I would love for you to ring in on this topic.
Yeah, when it comes to automation, I couldn't agree more with my colleagues. I think, the more that we can set up to really kind of drive kind of the next best, action, whether that's in Viva or, that's in an email campaign, right? Being able to change lead scores and be able to kind of personalize the journey that either the patient or the HCP is on, and really kind of show kind of the data drivenness of it. I think that's huge. And I think, again, yes, we're definitely in a bit of an infancy, especially when it comes to machine learning. But I think we can get there, right? And I think we just need to kind of have the stakeholders that we have to report into, like, kind of buy into it, where it's not just perfect right out the gate, right? We need to have continuous optimization. We're going to have things that fail, right? We need, and they just need to understand where, like, some of these email campaigns aren't going to be reflective of their ideas, right? I think you have to kind of level set those expectations with those stakeholders so that it becomes a much more holistic conversation, rather than just like, well, this failed and tell me why, and why is this open rate 2%, right? And to Andy's point earlier, like, those metrics are kind of by the wayside now. Like, we need to kind of start thinking about things of more in a bigger scale, and really kind of like, where did this impact the bottom line, rather than like, did our open rate go up by 1%, right? It's more of those bigger conversations.
So I want to pedal back for a moment, Chris, with you. We were talking about agencies, and you seem to have a love-hate relationship with them.
It's probably an understatement, but yeah.
And this is a PG. This is PG.
Damn
it. So my question to you is, what are you using agencies for? I understand what you're not using agencies for, but what are you using agencies for?
Well, to be completely honest, I don't have a creative bone in my body. So, when I look at an agency, I really don't look at the technology piece or the expertise piece, right? I mean, I've kind of prided myself on building teams that are not pharma driven. Wherever I've gone in my career, my one job requirement is you must never have worked in pharma, because I can't stand people that just like, well, we'll just go hire an agency. No, you're not going to work for me, because the problem is that adds to my budget, that adds to our timelines, that really kind of impacts us as a whole organization. If we're really going to move fast, then we need to be able to execute internally. So I need to know you can pull certain reports. I need to know that you can launch an email campaign out of a marketing automation platform, that you can spin up a microsite, once it gets obviously, approved for dissemination, but things like that we can do internally. But when it comes to like the strategy and creative side of it, I think an agency is a great way to use them as a sounding board. But when it comes to the execution part of it, I'm never going to rely on them, especially when they're charging like $225 an hour. You think about one project that we did over at Alchemies, where it costs us close to $700,000 for a website update on our PI. A website update for your PI should not cost you 700 grand. I mean, that's just absolutely insane. And this is where I come back to with the agencies. Like, I don't know if this is an agency problem or if it was an internal resource problem, where because the digital marketer at the company should have known better, right? Should have been able to be like, hey, I could have figured this out or taken some sort of initiative. But they didn't. And this is where I kind of boil down to, like, for pharma people, and this is going to kind of piss people off. Are you dinos? Are you digital in name only? And not just, I know some people aren't, but it feels like the industry for digital marketing inside of pharma, they just don't want to adapt to the times and really hold their agencies accountable, where their agency says, oh, we can design that and execute it, and oh, we'll tie NetSuite to Salesforce. Well, that's impossible. So why isn't the digital marketer calling that out? And this is where I come back to, of that digital marketer should then be like, okay, well, I can either go figure this out, or we can hire somebody to figure it out, instead of this agency that takes 10 people in a room, and every time it's a conversation, it's cost me $2,000. So, really kind of own it and figure out where you can carve out those spots for a team or another individual, even if it's a consultant, but somebody you can bring in that you can, use as your personal sounding board, and somebody who help you get to your goals, rather than seeing the agency pulled all the way through. Because at the end of the day, the agency is going to turn over people. It's a lot harder to do something internal inside of your organization and switch out that kind of gear, if you will, than it is an agency. Because the agency, like, we just had somebody resign the other day, and somebody resigned 2 months ago. So now the whole account has shifted. So now you bring them up to speed, and they're still handling the execution. No, they shouldn't be. Like, it just a bunch of these types of conversations where, think about how much money you're blowing just on all of that. And if you kind of sit back and take it the holistic view and go, like, yeah, strategy, creative, let them handle that. Let the agency do that. That's not in my wheelhouse. Figure out what's in your wheelhouse and then go from there. And for us, it's really that whole execution piece. We know all the platforms, we know the connections, we own the data, we partner with our internal stakeholders, so there's no kind of territory grabs or anything like that. It's really, a cohesive relationship with all of our stakeholders, so that we can build and scale, efficiently. So if we ever have another COVID, we can figure out the best way for us to adapt, rather than, working with our agency to adapt.
And just to interject here really quickly, curious to know, are there agency folk coming to this event?
Well, if they are, they're probably burning their business card right now, realizing that they're not going to get their business from me. But maybe if their strategy and creative is really good, absolutely, I'll have a conversation with you. But do not sell me on your digital capabilities. Sorry.
Andy, Chris said something interesting about teams, and that he's looking from outside pharma. What about you? Is that happening for you too?
Absolutely. There's no question. To me, pharma is very insular. And yes, I'll use your dino, except I'll say dinosaurs. There's still, and I think I can say that because I work for a pharmaceutical company. But I will say GSK is probably a little bit more tip of the spear than potentially other folks. But I will say this.
I would agree with that. I respect GSK and their digital capabilities.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. But still, pharma is pharma. And, compared to, say, Netflix or Amazon or Zappos, we're left in the dust, and we're trying to catch up. But if we continue to employ or onboard people who have been working in pharma for a long time, that's not a breeding ground for innovation in my mind. So that said, I do have some folks on my team that have pharma experience of 10 plus years, myself included. However, more than 50% of my team are ex-pharma. And there's a reason behind that, because they bring a different perspective than people who have been in pharma. And it shows. They are thought provokers, and they challenge the status quo because they know that there's a better way to do things. Now, in terms of being able to execute on that, it's not as rapid as I would like it to be, for sure. However, just bringing them in-house sparks conversations that might not have been had before, to think outside of the box for pharma. And again, that box is wrapped up with red tape. There's no question. We can't be as innovative as we may want to be, but I think incrementally we can at least challenge what we've done in the past and really think about it. Prime example is, going back to agencies, not trying to talk smack on agencies, but when we get to a point where it's brand planning time and they come say, like, this is our media plan, and it's basically the same thing over and over again, they might do an incremental, oh, here's something innovative or new, we're going to go on YouTube or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, that's not necessarily innovative, but I mean, YouTube's been around for a while. But, in pharma, that's like, ooh, bright and shiny, as we like to call it. You called it something else, Chris, but, and they'll do it, and that's fine. But in the end, it's still like, well, 40% of your budget should go to display and 30% should go to paid search, and so on and so on. And I'm talking very tactical, but there's a reason behind it. It's because of the fact that things don't really change much year to year in terms of what they're proposing. But nobody's really coming to the words like, for example, if there is a particular treatment option that's pretty far along in their maturity, and you're targeting HCPs. Now, how many HCPs really come into the market that are new year over year? Not many, right? So it's like, okay, though the agency will say, well, displays for awareness, we need to keep it top of mind. Well, if it's somebody that's been prescribing our treatment option for a long time, they're aware, right? Do we need to hit them over the head with it? No. So what could we do better, more efficiently to reach these people, rather than just throwing ads on New England Journal of Medicine, say, oh, by the way, don't forget X. It's like, well, I won't, because I'm continuing to prescribe it because it works for my patients. And until that changes, you don't need to remind me. So how can we take that and take those funds and push it towards something that may be actually innovative? And I am not going to be able to answer that question. What is innovative? I don't know what that means, but the same channels are leveraged constantly, and there doesn't seem to be a little bit of change. I would like to be for brand stakeholders to challenge that. Say, is it really working? Like, we're 7 years in, and our target list hasn't changed really at all. Okay, maybe 5 dropped out, and we've added an additional 5, but they've been in our target list for years. Do we really need to do that? I'm not sure if we do. So that's the kind of thinking that we're trying to spurn, rather than like, oh, let's do an A/B test on this creative. Okay, great. So this one has a 0.01% higher click-through rate. We should go with that. Well, in volume, especially on the HCP side, what does that equate to? 2 more clicks? Like, I mean, come on. And who knows? Those could have been fat fingers for all we know. and so that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, really use data to answer bigger questions that will actually have an impact on the business, rather than investing in 14 different platforms, like Chris said. Like, really? For what? What are we going to use these for, other than to throw good money after bad, potentially?
So this winds me up perfectly for a question for Sharon. So we're talking about the marketing strategies. So as pharma companies develop their sales and marketing strategies for 2022, what capabilities and technologies are going to be critical for their success?
Right. So, we're at a point where we really have to lift the hood and take a look at the platforms that we're working on, because a lot of this is going to be dependent upon our ability to, to scale. And we need to be modular in our approach. So, companies really need to be looking at what is their base platform? What is their CRM platform? What is their preferred platform? Do they have it in-house? Do they need to, do they need to buy, or do they need to build? And we need to start having those conversations. What are your, as Chris said earlier, what is your minimal viable product that you need to go to market? And you really need to be able to identify that and scope that out and create an architecture around that that's going to work specifically to your business. So what we look at is, if you're on a .NET program, or if you're on a cloud-based platform, that tells us the scope and the range of capabilities that we can introduce into any one of our clients. And so the components of that, that's where things I think get a little bit challenging, and you really have to understand your business need or who your internal customer is and what you're trying to accomplish. Because for a lot of what we want to do to be able to orchestrate, you do need to invest in a good customer data platform. You do need the ability to orchestrate, to the point made earlier about, test versus control. You want to be able to deploy that in real time in a way that it's going to have real value for your business. So, what's going to help you to be able to do that? And I think there has to be an understanding about when to introduce AI. It's a big buzzword this year. I think we all want to be there, but the reality is most of these platforms are going to run off of, some kind of decisioning tool or rules-based tool. It's not necessarily AI yet. The more data we introduce into these platforms will increase our ability to deliver machine learning and consequently AI. So, we really need to think about what our playbook is going to look like and how we, need to build it in a way that's going to support our businesses. And again, these things are very costly. Chris said, $400,000 on, how many systems? Do we really need all of that? So we need to prioritize. We need to determine what we're going to buy, what we're going to build, and who our data partners and integration partners are. That all has to be part of the playbook. But a company, it has to really think about what their growth plan is and the level of disruption and the level of innovation that they are willing to support from, a budget standpoint. We all have the same process every year where we go ask for CapEx, and then that money has to be divvied out or brands get taxed. So we have to find a way to work together and really think about how to improve the value that we're bringing through these systems, how we're going to measure it, because that's going to change. Click-through rates don't apply anymore. How do we measure engagement? And I think, the point is we're so early on the digital maturity curve. The point about bringing in folks from outside of the organization, from outside of Pharma is very valid. In our organization, we service HR, we service transportation. If you've ever gone through an Easy Pass, we manage all of that back-end transaction. So, we're looking outside of our organization to reconcept and rethink. And I find that every time we have a conversation, we have to bring in more people, more IT people, more, business strategizers from outside of our organization. And it slows us down a little bit. But I think what we're really driving towards are efficiencies in how we're creating an architecture that can really work to support our businesses and bring value at the same time with the lowest CapEx investment, so that we can bring value to our customers. So, think big, but start small, and really think about what's going to help you drive your business, and think about where it's scalable. Make it modular, because if it doesn't work, you want to be able to extract it and, introduce something new, right? But it really does start with a cloud-based platform. And if you don't have that as a basic capability, that has to be, something that your company should be thinking about initially and immediately.
Everyone, I'm so sorry we have to end this, but Chris, Sharon, Andy, that was enlightening. Mm-hmm. Thank you for telling us how to work fast and break shit. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.